During the mourning period for Colonel Aureliano Buendia, Fernanda del Carpio gives birth to her third child with Aureliano II, Amaranta Ursula. For years, the elder Amaranta, who is the last living second-generation Buendia, has been retreating into her memories. Amaranta lives more in her lonely, regretful past than in the present. Visited with a premonition of her own death, she begins to sew her own funeral shroud. When she finishes, she announces to the whole town that she will die at dusk, and she offers to take with her letters from the living to the dead. Still a virgin, she dies. After Amaranta's death, Ursula goes to her own bed and will not get up again for many years. She is often visited by little Amaranta Ursula, with whom she develops a loving relationship. Mime, the first daughter of Aureliano II and Fernanda del Carpio, grows up as frivolous as her father, only feigning interest in the clavichord that her mother forces her to study. With her father, Mime develops a companionship based on shared interests and mutual distaste for Fernanda. She befriends a few American girls and starts to socialize with them, even learning a little English. Mime falls madly in love with Mauricio Babilonia, a mechanic working for the banana plantation who courts her bluntly and shamelessly and whose openness and solemnity entrance Mime. He is followed always by yellow butterflies. Fernanda discovers them kissing in a movie theater and confines the lovesick Mime to the house. When she deduces that Mauricio Babilonia sneaks into the house every night to make love to Mime, she posts a guard in the backyard. When Babilonia returns once more, the guard shoots him, shattering his spine and paralyzing him for the rest of his life. The tragic paralysis of Mauricio Babilonia traumatizes Mime, striking her mute. Scandalized by Mime's behavior, Fernanda takes her on the long journey back to the city where Fernanda was born. Mime is interred in a convent, where she spends the rest of her life thinking about Mauricio Babilonia. Months after she arrives, one of the nuns from the convent appears at the Buendia house with Mime's illegitimate child, fathered by Mauricio Babilonia, whom Fernanda keeps hidden in Colonel Aureliano Buendia's old workshop. Ashamed of Mime's actions, she pretends that the child is a foundling. He bears the name of Aureliano II. Meanwhile, José Arcadio II, the silent and solitary brother of Aureliano II, has been organizing the banana plantation workers to strike in protest of the inhumane working conditions. Macondo is placed under martial law, and the workers respond by sabotaging the plantation. The government reacts by inviting more than 3,000 of the workers to gather for a meeting with the leadership of the province and to resolve their differences. The meeting is a trick, and the army surrounds the workers with machine guns and methodically kills them all. The corpses are collected onto a train and dumped into the sea. José Arcadio II, taken for dead, is thrown onto the train as well, but he manages to jump off the train and walk back to Macondo. There, he is horrified to discover that all memory of the massacre has been wiped out. None of the people of Macondo remember what happened, and they refuse to believe José Arcadio II when he tells them. A heavy, unrelenting rain falls on the town and does not stop, destroying any physical traces of the massacre. The army and the government continue exterminating any surviving Union leaders and denying all reports of a massacre. Finally, José Arcadio II is tracked down at the Buendia house, where he is hiding in Melquiade's old room. Looking in the room, which seems to all the Buendias exactly as it was in the days of Melquiades, the soldiers see only decay, as if the room has aged immeasurably. They do not notice José Arcadio II. Terrified of the outside world after the massacre, José Arcadio II takes refuge in the gypsy's old room, studying Melquiades' incomprehensible manuscripts. Slowly, he becomes dead to the outside world, and his obsession leads him to a loss of sanity. José Arcadio II lives only for the study of his texts and to preserve the memory of the 3,000 who died in the massacre. The rain that begins the night of the massacre does not stop for almost 5 years. Imprisoned by the rain, Aureliano II lapses into a restful quiet, abandoning the debauchery of his earlier years. He begins to care for the children, Amaranta Ursula and Aureliano Nayin, Mem's illegitimate son, who has finally escaped from the room where Fernanda del Carpio had been hiding him. Ursula, bedridden, grows more senile and less coherent, becoming merely a plaything for the children, who learn from her the stories of their ancestors. The rain eats away at the house and reduces Aureliano II's vast fortune to nothing, as all the animals he bred with Petracotes die in the flooding. Fernanda occupies herself with contacting the telepathic doctors who are trying to heal her from a disease of the uterus, and she also occupies herself by tormenting her husband, Aureliano II, who loses his temper and breaks every valuable thing in the house. Aureliano II, in turn, occupies himself with an attempt to find the fortune in gold coins that Ursula has hidden somewhere in the backyard of the house. When the rains finally end, Macondo has suffered a precipitous decline. The banana plantations have been washed away, and the town is receding backward into memory. With the end of the rains, Ursula gets out of bed and tries to rehabilitate the Buendiá house. She discovers José Arcadio II, who has been sequestered in his room for years, trying to decipher the ancient prophecies of the gypsy Melquiades. Returning to the house of his concubine Petracotes and finding all their animals dead, they are forced to struggle as never before to make ends meet. Their parties are merely humble replicas of their old festivals of debauchery, but they are as happy as they have ever been, once again falling madly in love with each other. Aureliano II finds himself spending less and less time with the children, who are swiftly aging. Aureliano II falls into the pattern of the family's tall, thin, solitary Aurelianos. Ursula continues to regress into her past, eventually dying at more than 120 years old. Rebecca, José Arcadio's widow, also dies during this time. A hellish heatwave descends on the town, and the townspeople begin to believe that they are plagued. Birds die in droves, and a strange, semi-human creature, the Wandering Jew, is discovered in the streets. The town assumes a broken-down, abandoned feel, and it fills up with nostalgia of its former prosperity. In the midst of this poverty, Aureliano II devotes himself to raising the money to send Amaranta Ursula to Europe for her education. But his great strength of former years has left him, and he is dying. José Arcadio II too is living his last days, and he is finally making progress in deciphering Melquiades' prophecies and in initiating Aureliano's cell into both the pursuit of prophetic knowledge and the history of Macondo. Finally, Aureliano II is able to send Amaranta Ursula to Brussels. His task complete, he dies at the same instant as his twin brother José Arcadio II, whose last words are a reminder to Aureliano II about the almost forgotten massacre of the striking workers. In the confusion of the burial, Aureliano II and José Arcadio II's coffins are mixed up, and each is buried in the other's grave. Aureliano II remains in Melquiades' old laboratory, visited occasionally by the ghost of the gypsy himself, who gives him clues and eventually helps him decipher the prophecies. Aureliano learns that the prophecies are written in Sanskrit and that they will be deciphered when they are 100 years old. The Buendias have become poor, but they are supported by food sent to them by Aureliano II's old concubine, Petracotes. Santa Sofia de la Piedad, the almost invisible widow of Arcadio, finally gives up on the family, and after a half-century of patiently tending to them, she simply walks away without any real indication of where she is going. Not long afterward, Fernanda del Carpio, who now does nothing but bemoan her fate and write to her children in Europe, dies, overcome with nostalgia. A few months after Fernanda's death, her son, José Arcadio II, returns to Macondo. He has become a solitary, dissolute man. It turns out that he has not been studying in a seminary, but has, rather, been counting on inheriting a large fortune. He is trapped in the old, dilapidated house, left with nothing but his memories and his delusions of grandeur. When he discovers the gold that Ursula Iguarán hid under her bed, he falls into debauchery, sharing with the adolescent children of the town in long nights of revelry. In his loneliness, he begins to become friendly with the solitary Aureliano II, who is making progress in his pursuit of knowledge. The two Buendias receive a visit from the last remaining son of Colonel Aureliano Buendia, who, like his 16 brothers before him, is shot down by the police as he stands in front of the Buendia house. The developing relationship between Aureliano II and José Arcadio II is abruptly cut off when 4 of the children, with whom José Arcadio II once celebrated at a party, kill him in his bath and steal his gold. Amaranta Ursula returns to Macondo from Europe, bringing Gaston, her husband. He has followed her back to Macondo, even though he realizes that her love for her hometown is a nostalgic dream. Energetic and determined, she wants to revitalize the house and the town, but Macondo's decline is irreversible. As Aureliano II wanders the rundown town, he discovers that almost no one remembers the Buendias, once the most notable family in the village. Following the family propensity toward incestuous love, Aureliano II falls in love with Amaranta Ursula. He finds partial solace for his unrequited love in his newfound friendship with a wise Catalonian bookseller and with 4 young scholars he meets in the bookstore. Together, the scholars prowl the underbelly of Macondo, visiting whorehouses and bars. In one brothel, Aureliano II is comforted by the ancient Pilar Ternera, his forgotten great-great-grandmother, who offers him her reliable wisdom and intuition. He also takes a lover, a black prostitute named Nigromanta. Gaston, bored in Macondo, becomes preoccupied with his dream of establishing an airmail service in Latin America. While Gaston is preoccupied, Aureliano II takes the opportunity to admit his love for Amaranta Ursula. Eventually she yields, and they become lovers. Gaston travels to Belgium to follow up on his business plans, and when he learns of his wife's affair, he does not return. First, the Catalonian, and then Aureliano II's 4 scholar friends leave Macondo, a town now locked in its quiet death throes. In the midst of the solitude of Macondo, the love affair between Aureliano II and Amaranta Ursula continues, fiercely and happily. The Buendia house falls into total disrepair, destroyed by the couple's rampant lovemaking and by the red ants that swarm everywhere. In fulfillment of the family matriarch, Ursula Iguarán's old fears about the dangers of incest, the lover's baby, whom they also name Aureliano III, is born with the tail of a pig. Amaranta Ursula bleeds uncontrollably after giving birth and soon dies. Aureliano II seeks comfort in the arms of Nigromanta and in drink, but he forgets about the newborn baby. When he finds the corpse, ants are feeding on it. He realizes that the line of the Buendias has come to an end. He boards himself up in the house and is finally able to decipher Melquiades' ancient prophecies. They are a description of the entire history of the Buendia family, from the time of the founding of Macondo. As he reads, he finds that the text is at that very moment mirroring his own life, describing his act of reading as he reads. And around him an apocalyptic wind swirls, ripping the town from its foundations, erasing it from memory.